Two Maple Leafs named to the World Junior Summer Showcase roster, but are they locks to make the team? We'll discuss that and more on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leafs-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sport stops sporting like you wanted to. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all their customers with a booster or bonus every single day. That's right, something for everyone, every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. What's going on, Dave? How you feeling on a Wednesday?
Well, I'm probably feeling a lot better than a lot of other people today who had to deal with the craziness that was Toronto not being able to deal with the rain.
Yeah, the monsoon of Toronto. Yeah, the downpour was brutal. So you didn't have to leave your house today, luckily?
I left my house just as it was like the rain was settling down. I'd go to my mechanic out in Brampton, and I'm coming. Like I get a message saying, "Oh, power's out in our area." Like, well, I'm not there, so that's a good thing. Driving home I'm driving from Brampton back to Etobicoke. Was a challenge. The challenge being. The 410, which is usually the highway you take, was flooded. So I couldn't go that way.
Much like the rest of the GTA.
Yeah, it's quite astonishing when you see highways flooded.
Dude, I didn't grow up in the city. I grew up obviously in Niagara, but the drainage system in this city is so bad. Like I've never experienced this in the 20 years that I lived in the Falls. Never experienced anything like this. And like this seems to happen often in the city. Like whenever there's a decent rainfall, there's always going to be problems. There's always going to be pools of water that pile up throughout the city. It's incredible. You know, I lucked out on the way to work. I avoided the mess of the DVP. It was just starting to, I guess, get a little deep into the DVP as I was driving through around 10 o'clock. And then like, I think an hour after I got to the studio, I look up and I see the CP24 on the news, car stranded, buried in water on the DVP. I'm like, I was there an hour ago. What the hell just happened?
You might have lost your car.
I could have lost my car. I know. Safe to say, I definitely had to take an alternative route home also. So yeah, it was a tough Tuesday in the city of Toronto. Hopefully everybody was safe and, didn't lose their car. There's a lot of people where their car right now is sitting on the DVP or sitting on the 410 or sitting on the lakeshore. And they're going to wake up to a towed vehicle and they got to figure out where the hell the car went. It's going to be a crappy couple of days for those people who tried to kind of go on through the water and it did not work out in their favor.
On top of that, the people who don't know how to four-way stop, that was fun dealing with people. Like Ed had an extra like half hour every intersection because it was just like which side's going. Like you're like, I know how to do a four-way stop.
But when the lights go out.
Because all the lights were out, the power being out. Oh yeah. On top of that, people didn't have power. So that didn't help situations either.
Yeah, tough. I think we lost power too because I think our how can you always tell if you've lost power?
Microwave.
Dave? The timer's always off. The time is wrong, and that's how you always tell. Because my roommate's like, "Did we lose power?" I'm like, "I don't know. I'm not at home. I was at work." And then I got home. The first thing I did, I checked the stove. All right, what's the time on the stove? Oh, yep, we definitely lost power because we're about 3 hours behind on the stove. So right away, yeah, we definitely lost power in downtown Toronto. I don't know if any of the people, I guess, who were out there at the charity golf tournament was that golf tournament still going on Tuesday, by the way? The Zach
No, I
Hyman
think it was
tournament?
just on Monday.
Okay, thank God, because that would have not gone well, obviously. Would have been a bad turnout, a rain out rather for the tournament. But I had a chance to hear from some NHLers and hear from some people. It's always nice to hear from Zach Hyman and heard from Connor McDavid and company. So that was great. It's awesome. It's fun when the media is open to go and talk to the players at charity events and open events like that, isn't it? Novel idea. No?
I thought that wasn't allowed. Maybe it's just a Toronto thing.
Yeah, well, it's not a Toronto thing. It's just a Marner thing. Just a Mitchie Marner thing. All right, let's get into what we want to talk about today. Because we got some news, a little news report coming out that the Hockey Canada's summer program of excellence announced what their camp roster is going to be, and a couple of Maple Leafs ended up making the roster. So why don't we take a quick break? Actually, we'll come back and then we could get into the meat of who's made it and if we expect for them to be representing Canada. We had Fraser Minton, Captain Canada last year at the World Juniors. Will we have some more Maple Leafs flair next year as well? We'll talk about that and more on the other side. It's Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop, but as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. FanDuel lets me keep sports going on whenever I want. I just got to open up the app, dream up some bets anytime I'm in the mood, and bam. And this summer, FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a booster or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone all day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you here on a Wednesday. And we got word yesterday that a couple of Maple Leafs have been named to Hockey Canada's World Junior Summer Program of Excellence Summer Camp is what they're calling it now. But basically, I believe this is the World Junior Showcase where they bring in a bunch of players. But I think they're calling it the Program of Excellence Camp because it's not just the World Junior U20 team. They're also bringing in the U18s and the U17s as well. So in total, 180 players across the three teams were all invited to this camp. Have I read that correctly, Dave?
Yeah, it's essentially if you're going to be in any of those World Junior tournaments, you're going to be at this camp.
2 Maple Leafs made the list. Easton Cowan, which should not surprise anybody at all, OHL MVP. And I mean, we're not sure if he's even going to be on the team because we're not sure if he's going to be with the Maple Leafs or is he going to be back with London or are they going to try and keep him around long enough and kind of do what they did with Shane Wright and maybe he gets a chance to play. I don't know, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. But Easton Cowan, one player for the Maple Leafs who got named, and also Noah Chadwick, who kind of came out of nowhere and had a monstrous season for his team out in the Dub, and he earned himself a nice little flyer to come out and see what he's all about at the development camp. So we'll get to Cowan in a second, but Noah Chadwick, that was a nice surprise to see, I bet.
It was. I mean, because he's also a player that's kind of nearing the end of his, junior career, right? Like he's not like some of these younger players.
Final year of eligibility.
Right. So generally, you see players who are also kind of get drafted earlier, right? You see the first, second, third round picks. Like, so it was a 6th round pick. So that's the other surprising part for me is to see like Chadwick, a player like that. But I mean, considering what he was able to do in the WHL, it's not all that surprising. He had a really good year with Lethbridge last year, played a game with the Marlies as well. So I think it's just recognizing what an impressive year he had.
Yeah, a well-earned invite for Noah Chadwick. You referenced it, the good year he had with the Lethbridge Hurricanes, the WHL. 12 goals, 44 assists, 56 points in 66 games. So nearly a point per game player. And that's coming off a season where he had just 5 goals and 20 points in 67 games. So, really, really improved, nearly 4x his production in terms of offensive production. And he wasn't even known as an offensive guy, like taken in the 6th round. This was just a big bodied, defensive defenseman. Maybe there's a little bit of two-way play in this game, but he's 6'4", 200 pounds. He's a big boy. And if he can put up these type of numbers in the dub, hopefully he could maybe even try and put these numbers up when he's with Team Canada next winter. But hopefully one day he's definitely going to be helping out the Maple Leafs at some point down the road here. But Noah Chadwick, really cool to see him. Hopefully he has an opportunity to make the roster. But Easton Cowan is obviously the marquee name there for the Maple Leafs. He's the top prospect. He was their 1st round pick last year. We all know the story. He went from reach to MVP. MVP of the Ontario League, not only in the regular season, but also in the playoffs. He was outstanding. The question, I guess, is he going to get lent out? Is he going to be loaned out? Because there's a good chance that Easton Cowan ends up making the team. Like the team, not the juniors, the Maple Leafs.
You brought up the Shane Wright comparison that, the Leafs would like to have Easton Cowan get some NHL games, but at the same time, like, he had such a dominant year in juniors that you wonder where's the best place for his development, right? So my guess is they'll try to keep. I know that there's ways you could try to keep a guy around with conditioning stints and things like that. But, I mean, the World Juniors would be great to see him go out and dominate a tournament like that. But at the same time, if he's playing so well for the Leafs and if he's in the mix and he's getting games, it might be just a situation where they say, you know what? We'd rather keep you around than go to the juniors, which it wouldn't surprise me. But I just think that most signs will likely point to him going to play in the World Juniors.
Oh, you think? Like, is that, if you had to make a prediction today, you think, we're going to play cosign, no sign in just a moment, I suppose. And I don't know if this was part of your cosign, no sign. If it is, we might need to change it. But like cosign, no sign, impromptu, Easton Cowan is on Team Canada at the World Junior Championships next year.
I'll co-sign it.
That means
I think he might even potentially be the captain.
Well, if he's there, I think that is totally a possibility for sure. And that'd be back-to-back years where Maple Leaf prospects captain Team Canada at the World Juniors. So that'd be pretty sweet if that is the case. I don't know, though. Like, I think there's an opportunity for him to make this team and be a daily contributor to the Maple Leafs next year, especially if they do end up moving on from like a Nick Robertson that really gives him an opportunity to land a top 9 role with the Maple Leafs. And if that's the case, I'm not sure that he gets lent out. I think that they just stick around. If he proves after the 9 games that he's NHL ready, then for sure, I think there's an opportunity for him to stick with the club. I guess we'll know more after those 9 games. If much like Fraser Minton, after a couple games, you kind of knew, all right, he's not quite ready. So he got sent back down to the WHL. Same situation could end up happening with Easton Cowan. Like, we both expect for him to get that 9 game look, see what's up, or could be a little less, obviously. I think Minton was only like 3. But he'll get an opportunity to see what he looks like against NHL talent. And depending on, if he ends up carving out a daily role or not with this team, I think will be, I guess, the reason why he does or does not end up with Hockey Canada. You know what? They're going to want him, but it's whether or not the Maple Leafs are willing to loan him out if it gets to that point. So we'll see. But that's kind of the newsiest part when it comes to what's going on with the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's the dog days, man. Not a lot going on when it comes to newsy items with the Toronto Maple Leafs. So this was kind of nice to pop up on our radar. Gives us something to chew on for a little bit. That being said, though, one of our favorite segments that we have here on the show is Cosign No Sign. And we've got a couple of things that are kind of percolating up in our brains that we want to get each other's thoughts on. So we'll play some Cosign No Sign next here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
Today's episode of Locked On Leafs podcast is brought to you by Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your monthly job visits, more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Welcome back into the Locked On at Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you here as we are each and every weekday, all month long here for the month of July, Monday through Friday. New shows coming at you wherever you get your podcast at AudioWise and also up on YouTube. We're on the road 10K subscribers. We're getting a little close. I think we crossed over 5,700 recently. So we're still a little ways away, but we're getting there. Slow and steady wins the race, Dave. Slow and steady wins the race. All right, let's play some Cosign, No Sign. This is a segment that you and I love to play. We like to kind of kick it back and forth with some takes that we have, some statements that we're going to make. And if we agree with the other person's statement, we're going to co-sign it. I agree. I'm co-signing. I'm with you. But if we disagree, we're going to no sign that bad boy. So why don't we start things off, Dave? You go first. Give me your first one.
I'm going to go with the NHL one first, just because this has been talked about a little bit. We talked about it on the podcast. I think it was last week. Sidney Crosby has not signed his extension yet. There's word that he is looking to sign an extension. But my cosign, no sign. Sidney Crosby finished his career with the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Cosign. 100% cosign. Like, I don't think it's even a question that he doesn't finish his career off with the Penguins. I think the deal's going to come, whether it's, I don't know, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it ends up being. I don't know, however long he wants to play hockey for, I guess. It's probably completely up to him. The deal is coming. I'm not too worried about that. And I think he wants to be one of the very few people who've, from pillar to post played for the same team, the same organization. It doesn't happen a lot in sports. Hockey, especially. You look at what just happened with Steven Stamkos. He was speaking as a member of the Nashville Predators for the first time today, live with his press conference, and the guy was in shock. He's like, I still got to get used to wearing this Predators logo.
Did you see the picture of him wearing the jersey? That was a sight.
Looked weird. Definitely looked weird. So, I don't think Sid ever wants to go through that. I think if it got to a point where the Penguins wanted to, go in a different direction, I guess, if they decide, all right, let's rebuild. We're not going to be a competitive team anymore. I honestly think it's more likely Sid hangs him up than goes to a different team, to be quite honest with you. So, yeah, I think he retires a Penguin. I don't know when that is. So I still think it's a couple of years away, but I think he's in it for the long haul when it comes to being a Pittsburgh Penguin.
It's fair. I also find it very tough. I think, given everything that's gone on with Pittsburgh lately, I think Kyle Dubas does not want to be the GM that let Sidney Crosby get away.
No, he'll now have 2 fan bases that hate his guts. If that happens, like if he ever plays for a different team, yeah, it's not going to go very well for him in Pittsburgh. He's already barely allowed back in the city of Toronto. Pittsburgh will not be happy about that. Okay, I got one for you. I'll stick to my NHL one as well. Actually, we'll kick down the NHL ones and then we'll wrap things up with our Leafs related cosign no signs. Joe Pavelski retires after 18 seasons on Tuesday. He said, I'm done. I'm finished. I'm hanging him up. We kind of knew that was coming. He had alluded to it when the Stars got eliminated. Joe Pavelski, Dave, is in fact a future Hall of Famer.
Yeah, this has been something brought upon recently when the news of his retirement was coming about. Oh, I'm of the cosign because I think people forget what he did also with USA Hockey, what he accomplished throughout his career. Like I think again, we're Canadian hockey fans. We don't necessarily see everything he's done. So, during his time with the Sharks, but also with USA Hockey. Like this guy was Mr. Consistent, scoring goals. He kind of got better later in his career, right? When he joined the Stars, putting up big numbers there too. I know that there's been a lot of talk about, are we not allowing the best of the best sometimes to get into the Hall of Fame? But I think Joe Pavelski one day can make the case.
He is one of those borderline guys, right? Like when
he's not a for sure Hall of Famer. He's not going to go in first ballot or anything like that. It's gonna take some convincing.
Yeah, I don't think he's a first ballot guy for sure, but eventually could it be one of those guys who gets in on kind of a weak year? Like once they finally get McGillney in and they finally get Cujo in and a bunch of these guys who it's like, oh, it's eventually they'll get in there and it's like finally, eventually we'll be sitting there saying, at some point they got to get Pavelski in there. I mean, pretty good career, like 1,300 games, 476 goals, 1,068 points. Never did win the Stanley Cup. He came close. He went to a cup final with the Dallas Stars. A couple of years ago, I guess it was that bubble year. When the first bubble when they came back from the pandemic. And then this year going deep into the Stanley Cup final, or into the Western Conference final against the Oilers. And then I guess it was the 2015-16, I think it was. He ended up in the conference final or in the Stanley Cup final against the Penguins that year as well. So a couple Stanley Cup finals appearances, but never actually locked down the thing. But lots of goals and a lot of individual success, obviously, for him. I think it's just the longevity. That's what impressed me most, I think, about Joe Pavelski. I mean, this is a guy who, even this season, like 40 years old, still scored 27 goals, 28 goals last year, 27 the year before that, 25 the year before that. Like just a beacon of consistency, and just someone who knew how to score. Now, it really slowed down for him in the playoffs. He had just one goal in 19 games this playoff, and I'm sure that's contributed to him deciding to hang him up. But he was a hell of a player, heck of a player. Maybe you could argue, if not one of the greatest seventh-round picks in NHL history, of that great 2003 draft. And in a redraft, he's probably in the top 10, you would say. I mean, definitely in the top 10, but like probably encroaching top 5 territory. That's a pretty damn good draft. So I think eventually he gets in. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I totally even forgot about the whole, he was not even a top pick. Like to me, that's just, what you have to overcome when you're such a late pick in the draft. To have the career that he did, I don't think not many teams thought he was going to be able to do it because they didn't pick him.
No, I mean, let me try and he's got more points than anyone in that draft. And like that 2003 draft is known as arguably the greatest draft of all time. Like we're talking Eric Stahl, Patrice Bergeron, Ryan Getzlaf, Corey Perry, Parise, Burns, Jeff Carter, Thomas Van Brown, Ryan Suter, Shea Weber, Ryan Kelly. Like the list goes on. Dion Phaneuf, member of the draft class. You look at how many guys played at least 1,000 games in that draft class. 23. No, actually, that's not true. But there were a decent amount of guys. I can't count that quick. But there was probably roughly 20 guys who ended up playing at least 1,000 games in that draft. And the guy who had the most amount of points that year, Joe Pavelski, or out of this class, Joe Pavelski, both goals and assists. So I think for sure he's a Hall of Famer eventually. First ballot, probably not, but definitely at some point he'll get in. All right, give me your Leaf one.
So my Leaf one, I kind of debated a few different ones here, but we already talked about Kyle Dubas today. So I figure we tie in Kyle Dubas somehow to this. Kyle Dubas targets a former pick of his and tries to trade for Nick Robertson.
Oh boy. What do they have to offer though? I guess a draft pick. I mean, they could offer some draft pick of some kind, I suppose. Gonna no sign it. I don't know. I think he probably realized that Nick Robertson, unfortunately, like the health issues with him might not be worth taking another flyer on. So I'm actually gonna no sign it. Yeah, I don't see him going after Nick Robertson again.
The reason why I mentioned it is because, I mean, I know Michael Bunting had a lot of success in Toronto, and that was a move that worked out for him. But he just has a thing to go out and get either former picks of his, if the guy's attached to the Sioux Greyhounds in some way.
Yeah, if Nick Robertson was a former Sioux Greyhound, I'd co-sign that real quick. But he's not. So I think he was a Peterborough Pete, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, he was.
I recall correctly. Yeah.
Yep, you were right on that one.
Before the season, his final season, which was even cut short. Like, Nick Robertson had a fantastic final year in junior. And, I mean, he was on pace for 20 goals this season if he were to have played all 82 games. Still a good player. Like, I still think that he's got a shot in this league. Will it be with Toronto? I just don't know. I really am just unsure if it's going to end up being here. I know he asked, or the report is he had asked for a trade out of Toronto, but we'll see if it happens. I'm not so sure that it's the Penguins that would come calling on Nicky Bobby, though.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how that whole saga plays out because, I mean, the Leafs are going to want to figure out if they have the player not going into training camp, if he's going to sign and things like that. So very curious to see how that all plays out.
All right, my Leaf one for you. I'm concerned about how weak the left side of the forward group is.
Okay, yeah. You lost Bertuzzi, so that was the left winger you lost.
Mm-hmm.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I think Bob McMahon played the left wing.
He can play the left wing, yes.
Yeah, I think I would say like we can co-sign that because the Leafs are very right shot heavy on the wing, and like Nylander's had to play his off wing. Kyle Yarncroke has had to play his off wing as well. But I think to me, like Matthew Nyes probably takes a step into that top six, and he'll play that left wing spot, which is his natural position. So I'll co-sign just because they don't have a lot of high-end left wingers, unless they find someone that's willing to just play on their offside, which I think is what's going to happen going into training camp.
Well, Domi would be that guy, right?
Yeah.
They could shoehorn Domi onto the left side, I suppose, if you want to try and play him up on the top line with Matthews and with Marner, and then you've got a left side of Domi, Nyes, McMahon, and Connor Dewar, I guess, could be your other player there, or Pontus Holmberg, however it ends up kind of shaking out. That's kind of your left side. Does that left side look like a team that can compete for a Stanley Cup with a left side like that? Like, I guess that's the true question you have to ask yourself to answer. If not, then yeah, I guess there is some concern there, right?
Unless that's something that when it comes to trade deadlines, they feel like they need to go and get that left winger. That'll be like kind of the one thing they can go out and get. I mean, they don't have a lot of draft capital. That's going to make those sort of trades very difficult. So yeah, I think they're just gonna kind of see what their options are. I mean, this is probably a debate for closer to training camp or when we get a chance to see more of the lines. But even whether Matthews and Marner play together, and if that's something that happens as well, right? So I think that when you look at the left side, I think because of how loaded they are with right shot, that they are probably not as concerned about the left wing side. But I mean, look, you look at the talent there, you look at what they have to offer. It doesn't scream elite, but that's also just the way that the team is kind of constructed in that regard.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll see what ends up kind of coming out of things, but it's possible we could end up seeing, I guess, Domi. What would that look like? Domi, Matthews, Nylander, and then
Something like that.
Nyes, Tavares, and Marner. I guess that's what that would look like, huh?
That's kind of how I pictured it initially.
Mhm.
And then like a Bobby McMahon. I mean, who would be the center of that third line?
I mean, whether it's Camp, Yarncroc is always an option, I suppose. Connor Dewar is an option. Pontus Lindholm as a 3C. One of those four guys could play 3C if they don't address that, which, again, you and I are on the same page here. That is the biggest hole remaining for the Maple Leafs right now, is that third line center role. We both co-sign that for sure as being the biggest black hole, I guess, on the Maple Leafs roster as it's currently constructed. But still, couple, we got like 6 weeks till training camp, more than that, like 2 months till training camp. What am I talking about? There's 2 months until we get back to training camp. So still tons of time to kind of figure things out. Saw a couple trades go down in the NHL earlier in the week. You got Jeff Jackson doing some moving and shaking with the Edmonton Oilers. You saw some other signings come through. Quentin Byfield signed an extension. So there's some things happening in the NHL. It's slow, it's moving like molasses, but there's some stuff happening. I would imagine the Maple Leafs have at least one or two more moves up their sleeve before we get ready for training camp.
Yeah, I think it's gonna take a little time, but I think once teams get closer to camp, GMs will wake up and be like, all right, let's wheel and deal it.
Yeah, exactly. All right, good stuff. That brings an end to the Cosign No Sign segment here on the Locked On Leafs podcast. Any final words, Dave, before we head out for the day?
I hope people are able to watch this. Those who don't have power, hopefully, maybe this is something that you're going to use as like your entertainment.
Do people still not have power?
Like my brother texted me at like 11:30. We're recording this. It's midnight right now. He had just gotten his power back.
Wow.
So
crazy.
Might have been a situation where I might not have even been able to record tonight.
True.
I didn't have power for part of the day.
Would have been an issue. Would have just been a morning record, realistically. Anyways, No one cares about that banter. That'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I did thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on X at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti, and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow. Some interesting comments coming out, by the way, when it comes to old Kyle Dubas. We might have a guest to chat about it tomorrow. Little tease for you. So make sure that you subscribe, hit the notification bell on YouTube so you know exactly when the new episodes drop, and all that would be greatly, greatly appreciated. Like I said, we'll be back with another episode for you all tomorrow. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.